of God, the all compassionate, the all merciful, welcome everybody, our dear presenters and participants, to the first webinar by the University of Religions and Denominations and the LUKE10. First of all, I will introduce the University of Religions and Denominations for our participants who are not familiar with this university. Very briefly, the University of Religions and Denominations is non-governmental and non-profit university. And this university has about 14 colleges: the College of Religion, the College of Islamic Denominations, College of Philosophy, Mysticism, Women and Family, Nation, Cultures and Languages, Media and Communication, Law, Quranic Studies, History, Religion and Art, Studies of Muslim Nations, Education, and Shia Studies. These are the 14 colleges, and each college has its own faculties and departments and faculty members. And also, the University of Religions and Denominations has two research centers. The first is the Research Center for Religion, and the second is the Research Center for Women and Family. And we are honored to have about 14,000 students, most of which are from international students. We have students from more than 30 countries. 80% of our students are exactly international. So now I invite dear Professor Doug Hostetter to introduce LUKE10, and then we can start the dialogue. Thank you very much, Doug.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be with everybody here. I'm Doug Hostetter. I am a peace pastor in the Mennonite Church, and I am part of the advocacy team of Pax Christi International at the United Nations. But most importantly, I am a president of LUKE10 and a chair of the webinar committee. And I was asked at the last minute to introduce the work of LUKE10. We all came together, a group of North American Christians who wanted to respond to the crisis of COVID as it was affecting Iran, because we were very aware that the sanctions that our nation was putting in place were prohibiting the Iranian people from being able to access the medical supplies and equipment that they needed to confront COVID-19. It's a broad ecumenical group of wonderful Christian leaders. And in the last couple of years, we used $100,000 to send medical supplies and equipment to the people of Iran. Through this process, we also realized that we wanted to build friendship and understanding between the people of Iran and the people of the United States, between Islam and Christianity. So over the 4 years, we have had 4 webinars. The first in December of 2020, Who is My Neighbor? The second in February 2021, The Theology of Friendship and Dialogue in the Abrahamic Religions. The third in September of 2021, Christianity and Islam, Friendship and Contemporary Challenges. And then today, we are having the 4th webinar, The Value of Dialogue, Islam and Christianity. We see the work of LUKE10 as building bridges of understanding and friendship with the people of Iran and between Christians and Muslims around the world. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Hostetter. Thank you very much for your brief introduction about LUKE10. And we hope your dialogues and programs have, we actually believe that it has fruitful results, and we are optimistic about our cooperation. Thank you. For the next, I invite Professor Dr. Abdulrahim Gawahi, who is a professor of religions, mysticism, philosophy, and he has done a lot of work. Actually, we cannot count his work. I'm sure we had a session about 2 or 3 months ago he told me that his publication will reach the number of 90 books. That's fascinating. And he's now the director of the World Religions Research Center and the director of the Futurism Department of the Academy of Sciences. Dr. Abdurrahim Gawahi, it's our pleasure to have your presentation.
Yes. Okay. First of all, let me thank everybody, our dear hosts, especially Dr. Rafati, and our dear guests and participants. In fact, both last week and today, I don't know why, but we had a little bit of problem to really to be connected to you. But thanks God, eventually we are connected. How much time do I have, Dr. Rafati?
It's about 9 to 10 minutes each presenter.
Okay, good. Let me confess in front of all our guests and friends, that is the first time that I have prepared so much material and I have to present it in 10 minutes. This is my first experience. And if I cannot manage it, please forgive me. But anyhow, as you mentioned, I have been involved in this task for almost the last 40 years. And I have participated almost all over the world in similar, dialogues with brothers and sisters from Christianity, Judaism, almost all religions. I've had similar sessions in China, India, I don't know, in Europe, in Vatican, many sessions in the United States at Notre Dame University, Catholic University. And I'm glad, this has been the objective of my life for the past almost half a century, that we somehow try to understand each other in the context of Abrahamic religions, especially between Islam and Christianity. Let me just mention one verse from our Holy Quran. It says, قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبينكم ألا نعبد إلا الله ولا نشرك به شيئا ولا يتخذ بعضنا بعضا أربابا من دون الله. This is in Surah or chapter Al Imran, verse 64. And this is exactly what we are doing now. We are trying to come closer mentally with each other and, cooperate. But as to the subject of the seminar, I have, I think, written some 9-10 notes, but simultaneously I will translate it for you. Let me just maybe in 1 minute remind you, Dr. Rafati said, but some of the books among the 70, 80 titles, some of the books I just want to remind to the dear participants. This one in front of me is the Science as Salvation by Mary Mijri, the philosopher of science in United Kingdom. And this one is an introduction to Islam by Annemarie Schimmel, which the great lady, which really I admired her very much. She wanted to sort of build a bridge between East and West, between Islam and Christianity. Or this other book, which I like it very much, is the Transcendental Unity of Religion. Religion vis-a-vis God is one. There is one God, many prophets, but one God and one man, created human being. And Schwann, which I think in the last decades of his life, he was living in the United States, Fritjof Schwann. He has written a fantastic book, The Transcendental Unity of Religion. Also, through Perio, Peace Research Institute of Oslo, for almost 10 years or even more, we had meetings twice a year, Christians, Jews, and Muslims try to, the same thing we are just following, the same goal we are following in this session, to bring together these three great traditions. And out of those meetings, I have published this and many other books that if I want to, one good book also, immediately after the 9/11, and a scholar by the name of Richard Bulliett in the United States, he has just in the morning after 9/11, he has started to write the book, The Case for Islamo-Christian Civilization. He is trying to say that 9/11 has nothing to do with Islam. Extreme groups, you can find them in Christianity, Judaism, and no one, will ever accuse us truly that Daesh is part of Islam or Taliban is part of Islam or Qaeda is part of Islam. These extreme groups are. He writes that Islam and Christianity have for long lived together, which one sample of it we have in Iran. If you go to the city of Isfahan, you will see the very old church there. With this background, I think, which has already taken half of my time, I think any dialogue based on my 40 to 50 years experience, exactly in this same area, there are some maybe prerequisites or fundamentals. One is that when we dialogue, we should dialogue based on equality, respect, brotherhood, trust, and cooperation. If we don't, observe this, criterion, we will not reach a very positive, and fruitful result. The other thing is that I believe as a Muslim, we need even more interreligious dialogue between Shiites and Sunnis, even between different factions of Shiites within Iran, within Iraq, within other Shiite countries, than intra-religious dialogue. When we ask our Christian brothers and sisters or Jewish brothers and sisters, let us unite, let us work together. The first thing is that we have to have practiced it at home. Then the third point, I'm trying to go over these 10 points as briefly and as quickly as possible so that at least I mention the headlines and maybe later on we can discuss it.
Thank you very much. If Dr. Gawahi joined us, we will actually give him a 1 or 2 minutes at last to actually conclude his discussion. But what I understood from his speech is the most complex conflicts we have, the most serious dialogues we need, because he mentioned to the interreligious dialogues. I concluded that. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gawahi. And now we will go to Bishop John Chain. Actually, as you know, he was consecrated as the 8th Bishop of Washington, D.C. in June 2002, and he retired in December of 2011. And as bishop, he served 98 schools and churches in the district and Maryland also. Bishop Chain currently resides in San Diego, California, and continues to serve the Episcopal Church as the assistant bishop of Diocese of San Diego while continuing his work in the Middle East and Levant, engaging in public and theological diplomacy, seeking peaceful solutions to international conflicts. Bishop Chain, we are all ears.
There you go. Yeah, I just wanted to take a very brief moment to say that as Doug was talking about LUKE10, we really were incorporated as a 501c3 in the United States in 2020, in the spring of 2020.
when COVID-19 was emerging as a great threat, and its infection rates across the world probably coming close to the pandemic of 1918 that killed millions of people around the world. And then on April 7th of 2022, I had received an email from a colleague from Iran's Center for Interreligious Dialogue requesting assistance from Christian churches in the United States. And the request was to assist in addressing the acute health impact of COVID-19 on Iran's population and the country's difficulty purchasing or developing anti-COVID vaccines because of heavy economic pressure based on Iran's sanctions that were created to place Iran in that position by the United States. And so we immediately responded, and we can get back into it. I think Doug covered that quite well in his opening remarks. What I would like to share with you is my engagement specifically on interfaith work in Iran. My dialogue with Iran began in 2005 when President Syed Mohammad Khatami visited Washington National Cathedral during my years as serving as the Bishop of Washington, D.C. President Khatami spoke about the need to study the integration of Oriental and Occidental theology. He spoke about his work in developing the idea of the dialogue among civilizations. And he had presented this concept to the United Nations in New York City. And it was a response to Samuel P. Huntington's theory of the clash of civilizations. He had presented this opportunity to the United States and United Nations with the hope that it would bring a deeper engagement with the West, and particular an engagement with the United States. So immediately following his presentation, and before he left to travel back to Iran, we had time to discuss a proposal that the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. establish 4 Christian Muslim summits to be held in Washington, Beirut, Tehran, and Rome. The 4th one would end up in Tehran and finish the 4th dialogue. Both President Khatami and I believed then, as I believe now, that such work could also address the dangerous rise of Islamophobia in the West and Islam's suspicion of monolithic Christianity. So those 4 summits occurred in 2008, 2010, 2012, and 2014, and they involved Christian, Shia, Sunni Muslim religious leaders, scholars, and other representatives from around the world. The work in Rome was praised by the Pope and was actively then supported by the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue in the Holy See. And during that summit, the Pope invited his old friend, the Chief Rabbi of Buenos Aires, to join us in our discussions, which he did. The Pope was so impressed with the focus and theme and the engagement of those scholars and religious leaders that he invited that group to his chambers for a private audience with him, so that he could meet each person who was involved, pray with them, for them, and to continue to support the work of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue on these matters that we were addressing. People ask me, who have you worked with, and how many times have you visited the Islamic Republic of Iran? And I've had the opportunity and the honor of visiting the Islamic Republic on 7 occasions, and I've had meetings with other representatives of the country, religious leaders in particular, in other parts of the world. I've had the honor of meeting with representatives of Iran's Center for Interreligious Dialogue. Have always had a fond and loving relationship and a respectful relationship with my good friend Ayatollah Damad through the Academy of Sciences. Also worked with Club de Madrid and the Oslo Center for Peace and Human Rights, and participated in their meetings in Iran and in other parts of the world. Spent some time meeting with the former head of Iran's nuclear program, Ali Larijani. We spent our time talking about Augustinian theology, which was fascinating. We spent a lot of time talking about that theology. We also had the opportunity to meet. I had the opportunity to meet with Supreme Leader to talk about the role of religion and its ability to transcend the divisions that not only divided religions but also had become politicized, and it should not have been politicized. And I met with him in 2009. Also was invited to participate in the World Against Violence and Extremism conference in Tehran, and also had several opportunities to meet with former President Ahmadinejad to discuss the role of religion in conflict resolution during his visit to the United Nations in New York, and then again, several very intense but very good conversations in Tehran. Also, meetings with representatives of the Islamic Republic to the United Nations, including many meetings with former Ambassador, His Excellency Mohammad Hassai, also the current ambassador representing the Islamic Republic to the United Nations, His Excellency Majid Ravanchi, and also Sadegh Amioli Larijani, and also Javad Zarif, to discuss the religious directives of compassion and the care for the other shared by the teachings of both Jesus and the Prophet Muhammad. And it's very important that we live as LUKE10, as an organization that lives within the concept of the scriptures of Jesus, which is to care for the other and love the other as we would care and love ourselves. And so the concept of LUKE10 is based on that core teaching of Jesus. The work in Iran literally includes a portfolio of many other meetings with other Iranian religious scholars and academics in Qom, Tehran, Washington, D.C., since this journey began at Washington National Cathedral with President Khatami in 2005. Somebody asked me, what is it like to be in Iran? And I have to share this with you, that when in Iran and out of meetings, I've had the opportunity to meet with students, old friends, and religious colleagues, and it's almost like coming home, connecting with people and a country that I know quite well and that is robustly embraced by the rich history and art, architecture, prose, and poetry. There are always questions that are asked about what was it like living in Washington, D.C. I will not mention any of my responses at this point, except to say I lost some hair and became a lot grayer serving in Washington, D.C., but it did me the opportunity to work with several members of the administration, the White House, et cetera, and in Congress to address the issues that we are discussing right now. Also, conversations over good Iranian food, tea, and just getting away from the intensity of dialogue on occasions gives me the opportunity to really connect with our old friends and talk about family and colleagues that we work with. Finally, it's important for me always to say to people who look at me and say, why do you do this? Is to say that as countries, and also as people of the Holy Book, we share far more in common than people believe divide us. There is very little division in the work that we do. It is a work based on compassion, bearing the burden of others, and loving our neighbor as we would love ourselves. That work is at the core of what LUKE10 does, and that work has been at the core of the work that I've had the honor to share with my colleagues in Iran for many years. So I thank you very much for allowing me to just share that journey down memory lane and also actively where I am right now.
Thank you very much, Bishop Chain. That was very interesting. But I just wanted to add that the university, actually the roots and the background of the University of Religions and Denominations goes back to 1994. So before the actually idea of dialogue of civilization proposed by President Khatami, the university for decades was working on this theory. And at the level of academics cooperation, we were doing this. And we believe that if we want dialogue to have fruits, we should bring the religious challenging issues as the topic of college students' dissertation, and we should choose the religious other as the supervisor of those dissertations and papers. And this is what we are doing here in our university. Thank you very much. And so Dr. Chloe actually is the executive director of the Interfaith Center of New York. We are really honored and proud that we have her in our dialogue. Thank you very much, Dr. Chloe. Actually, this center is a nationally recognized nonprofit that brings together diverse grassroots religious leaders with civic officials to address New York City's most actually pressing social concerns. Thank you very much, Dr. Chloe. We are all ears.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is a great honor to be here, and thank you so much to the University of Religions and Denominations for hosting this webinar with LUKE10. We're an honored partner. I'm going to seek to share my screen, if you'll bear with me for 1 second here. Let's see.
While you are presenting your screen, you're sharing your screen, let's say good morning and good evening, because it's 8 p.m. here.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
By the way, I see the name of Professor Dr. Abdurrahim Gawahi. Dr. Gawahi, your last sentences of your presentation actually was cut and we didn't have your actually voice. So if you wish, if you mind, we can have your conclusion of your presentation at the end, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Thank you. But we don't have your actually camera, your picture. We just have your voice. Thank you. Dr. Chloe, it seems that we have your screen.
Okay, great. This is not the perfect screen because ideally it would be bigger than this, but I'm going to leave it as it is, if that's okay. Okay. Well, as I was saying, it's an honor to be here. You've introduced the organization that I work for, which is the Interfaith Center of New York. And what I thought I would do today is to present a little bit about the transition from dialogue into action as something that we have been trying to do as Christians and Muslims for millennia, going back all the way to the 7th century. going back to opportunities of Christians in the East dialoguing with the Muslims that they lived with, to attempts by Christian holy men such as St. Francis of Assisi to overcome divisions during the time of the Crusades and to meet with the Sultan of Egypt, to an entirely kind of a long tradition in the history that also was given much more attention after 9/11. And I wanted just to quote a little bit with the former Archbishop of Canterbury, who very quickly after 9/11 brought together a group of Muslim scholars at Lambeth Palace in England and really put together a dialogue that made him, and I think, reflect on how this concept of mercy and compassion are not just attributes that we assign to God, but rather are humanitarian values which we are called to act upon. And this conversation that happened in England in 2002 was one of many cross-cultural interfaith dialogues. And Archbishop Carey was a participant in one of the 4 dialogues that Bishop Chain spearheaded as a result of his conversation with President Khatami. And I think what I'd like to do is to present 2 examples, both locally and international, of how we as people of faith can transition from dialogue into action. And I just want to first put out the question of why. Why should we do that? Because sometimes dialogue itself is so difficult that one wonders, is it perhaps, should we not just stop there? Because it's extremely hard sometimes to have a dialogue with someone that you would disagree with for religious or any other reasons. I think that the first example of a transition from dialogue to action for us at the Interfaith Center of New York came from a document that you will be familiar with. And the question is, how do I, let's see this. A document that you will be familiar with, which is a common word between us and you, that, as you know, was signed by over 300 Muslim scholars and directed to Christian leaders throughout the Muslim world. We at the Interfaith Center sought to try to put this dialogue into action through the support of an organization that had actually supported the common word between us, the GHR Foundation. And we thought we would try to concentrate very locally on how Christians and Muslims in New York City might be able to work together. We have always, since our founding in 1997, brought together. So what I was saying is that this in New York City, the work that we do with faith leaders is with religious leaders, because we recognize in some traditions women are not ordained, and yet they exert a powerful influence and have important constituencies within their faith traditions and are leaders. So this the work of putting the common word into action meant looking at the Bronx, which is a poor district in New York City, and having Catholic and Muslim faith leaders work together on feeding people in the Bronx, a poorest congressional district in the United States. It meant that when we looked at Staten Island, we had youth groups going and visiting one another's houses of worship. And this was at a time when there was a lot of tension because of a proposed creation of a mosque at Ground Zero, which caused a huge sort of hubbub. And what we found is that the children of the Catholic parents, the parents were very reluctant to have their children go and visit an Albanian mosque that's on Staten Island. And it was the children that actually persuaded their parents to let them do that. They each did service to the other's congregation. So you can see this child was vacuuming the floor with great gusto. And then at the Catholic Church, some of the Muslim children helped do a cleanup as well. And this was important because it was a way for children to meet each other, but more importantly for parents as well, to overcome some of their prejudices. So these were some specific local examples of how to transition from a dialogue that was important globally to actually actions on the ground. I'm going to talk now just briefly about a second example, and that's what something that some of you are familiar with, because it goes to what Bishop Chain had said about this dialogue that he and others have organized for many years, culminating in Tehran in 2016, which with the fourth year of this Shia Sunni Roman Catholic and Anglican Episcopal dialogue. This was a conversation that, as he said, had resulted, it came about over many years and it came to fruition in what he called a call to action. And that call to action was itself like a common word between us, a very inspiring result of dialogue. This is my own summary of the call to action, which promoted, between Christians and Muslims, a culture of nonviolence, and recognizes also the disproportionate impact of violent conflict on women and the need for women's inclusion at peace tables and interfaith dialogues. It called for protection of religious minorities and self-reflective and self-critical approaches to sacred texts and traditions when necessary. The document stated that the concept of believers and non-believers should not affect citizens' rights and social relationship, and that hatred, humiliation, and persecution based on a wrong understanding of both the Bible and the Holy Quran offends God. So this was a very important declaration, and it was covered in the press a bit, and I was particularly inspired by these clauses about affirmation about women's role in peacemaking because of them bearing the brunt of armed conflict. And then also that, that they can be targets of misinterpretation of texts. And we see that, in fact, playing out in the United States right now as well. But the importance of the role of women in dialogue and in peacemaking was something that inspired my own work very recently to travel to Afghanistan with a group of women from the United States who have had a long-term interest in peacemaking, particularly with Afghanistan, and including some members of whose family members had died in 9/11, but were committed to trying to overcome some of the conflict that has been part of our last 20 years of existence. So again, in the spirit of the importance of women being present around the peace table, one of our colleagues, Daisy Khan, shared what she and her Afghan scholar compatriots have come up with, called the Universal Declaration of Muslim Women's Rights. And it's a really thoughtful document that I will, as soon as I finish, put into the chat for people to take a look at. It's translated also into Pashto and Dari. And we handed that to our hosts, who in this case were the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan government, who have not shown themselves to be great friends of women. So these pictures that I'm about to show you come from just last month, and many of the girls who are still struggling in high school to even get an education. These were incredible young women who had been taking advantage of education that they had had for the last 20 years, and are now cut out of public school, high school education still. These were women who were medical students graduating, as it turned out, coincidentally, next to the hotel where we were staying, from Herat. And again, still very concerned about job opportunities that they would have in the future. and a meeting with the Ministry of Education, again, in a role of, seeking to be in a peacemaking role where you speak with people that you disagree with. I wouldn't say huge fruits have come from these meetings, but we felt obliged to open some dialogue. And I think that we were the first Americans in the civilian capacity to be doing this. As you well know, the poverty is unbelievable right now in Afghanistan. And you have incredible breadlines in Kabul of people women waiting to, on the charity of the shops when they're finished for the day. You have people selling their household goods. Again, poverty, like everything else, is bearing a disproportionate impact on women and children. And I just want to conclude by saying that a part of our meeting had to do with us addressing the fact that this new poverty has to do with the United States refusing to let its Afghanistan's central bank assets return to its central bank. And part of our work in the United States has been trying to advocate for that to happen in Congress. And our trip concluded with a press conference that this woman who you see in front of you lost her brother-in-law after 9/11 or during 9/11, and has been committed to working in Afghanistan ever since that happened. So her first trip was in 2002. Her name is Kelly Campbell. And this was the press conference that we held about the importance of involving women in education and in public life, and also that we will call on our government to unleash some of undo some of the funds. So I wanted just to conclude that one of the important reflections, we heard about how there had been some religious officials who had, harassed some girls who went back to school because they were wearing white socks, and white was the color of the Taliban flag. And I would say, that it just seemed like sometimes, that is a confusion of what is important and what is the role of symbols. And in, Christianity, we can think that the role of symbols is to bind us to one another and recognize our humanity. And I'm, quite certain that that is the case in Islam too. As these are the most, precious entities of these girls. So it was a pretty serious, how would I say, aberration, it seems to me. So thank you all for your attention, and I look forward to answering questions.
Okay, thank you very much. After the all presentations, we have actually questions and answers, Dr. Chloe. Now we will actually listen to Dr. Barziger. No, Dr. Barziger, as you were not online, so we had a shift in the order. Dr. Barziger has got her PhD from the University of Religions and Denominations in Women Studies, and then he actually left Iran to Austria. She was actually living in Vienna and in the Department of Development Studies for 6 months. She had a research program there in the University of Vienna. And now she has a really great role in the university. As I introduced, in the University of Religions and Denominations, we have a research center for women and family studies. And she is the research deputy of the center. Dr. Barziger?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you and to meet you all. What I'm going to talk about is about women in dialogue. The topic is very challenging, debatable, and fascinating. It seems is very fascinating. So when we talk about women and dialogue, definitely women constructive dialogue, and by this we accept that the dialogue has two parties, and to have constructive dialogue, the mutual understanding of two parties is the main factor in dialogue to bring a clear understanding. So no matter what is its subject, there are some bases that were the key role in reaching the fruitful dialogue and outcomes or practical outcomes of dialogue. So these bases, when it comes to women and dialogue, are twice important. Before I go to the factors that are important in constructive dialogue, and especially that are the factors that totally affect the participation and women's role in dialogue, I have to point out and admit that women must play role in any dialogue, and they are able enough to play their own role in the best possible way. So let's go to the factors or elements that may affect women's participation or women's role in dialogue. You see in the slide, I suppose that the role and women's role and participation in dialogue is dominated by, in generally speaking, is dominated by three structures: political structure, social structure, and cultural structure. And so I just beyond this is the general sphere that affect women's participation in dialogue. So the first factor that we have to notice or consider in talking about women in dialogue is the definition of dialogue. I go beyond the technical or scientific definition of dialogue and just refer to its literal meaning, which indicates that two or more characters that engage in conversation. So regarding women in dialogue, there must be other part or other party or other side of dialogue, and its understanding, perception, and ideology, even view, may affect this dialogue. The other factor, the second factor, is context. You know, we believe and we accept that there are some certain frameworks that may affect or limits any dialogue. And when we talk about the women in dialogue, these limitations are even more than men. And we see that, we believe that, accept that these frameworks are contextual. You know, I mean, some limitations from one country to another country, these limitations may be different. The other point or the second factor is aims of dialogue. What is the aim of dialogue? If we the aim of dialogue definitely is resolving the conflicts, social, cultural, political, or behavior harms or issues. And the other aim seems to be that to bring a clear understanding of needs, harms, and problems. So if the issue or the subject of dialogue is about women, definitely for sure that women can offer a practical solution for the dialogue, since they have the live experience about the problems or needs or harms that they experience. The fourth factor is about the agents. I mean by this factor is the who are the parties. Definitely the parties, either men or women. But there are just two questions: which one of these parties have authority over the other side, and the other question is that in dialogue, is the authority of women is accepted by the other side, I mean men, or not. We should answer these questions in any dialogue, in any countries or societies that we want to hold the dialogue. The fourth factor, the fifth factor is ability. The ability, we believe that women are able to go beyond their borders and participate in any dialogue. I know that there are some areas we may need women empowerment to have fruitful and constructive participation in a dialogue. And so sometimes in some cases or in some contexts or some countries, we need women empowerment, and to reach women empowerment, we should have active communication from women in social and or personal life. The other factor is about the availability. Mostly, we believe that mostly women don't have chance to join dialogue, and at the end, people have judgment that they are not powerful or knowledgeable enough about the dialogue, and so they don't. People have this judgment, so they don't like to join. In general speaking, we see that cultural, social, and political perception about women and gender would limit women's participation and role in dialogue. The seventh factor is about the authenticity. Mostly, by this factor, I wanted to say that mostly women's role in dialogue or dialogue that only conducted by women is not taken serious at the result, and at the end, the outcome of this dialogue is not also taken serious. So, and even more problem we may see that is not just by men. Even in some countries, in some situations, societies, we see that women themselves don't believe in other women's ability and talents. So by this, we first need to convince men and women about the authenticity of talent and ability of women in dialogue. The other factor is that there are some obstacles that may limit women's participation in dialogue and may even make it inefficient. No doubt that these obstacles derive from social, political, cultural perception about women and gender, or any other related issues to women. The last point is about the subject. What is the subject of dialogue? If the subject is about women, definitely, for sure, women must join this dialogue because they have lived experience about the needs, harms, and issues. And if it's not just about women, it's a general or social issue, definitely. The other, for sure, one of the parties of dialogue should be women, because women in any society or any country is half of the population, and people cannot ignore them. The last point is that, to be honest, we see that this slide, we see that women in dialogue is affected by these elements and in this atmosphere. And if we want to, if we mean by women in dialogue, women's constructive participation and role in dialogue, first we have to consider these factors, because I believe that all of these factors affect women's role.
I think we've lost the sound of Dr. Barziger. Am I correct? Okay, thank you, Dr. Barziger. That was very helpful discussion. And I believe that in contemporary world, women have shown that they are successful. And this is very obvious that in political matters, we've seen that powerful women, they have shown extraordinary management. So, and also women are part of the society. That's very, very clear and obvious. Thank you, Dr. Barziger. And now let's go to Dr. Fayyazi. And Dr. Fayyazi, we know him, and maybe our team, LUKE10, they also know him. He was in Hartford Seminary for a while, and he had many good programs in the United States of America. And then he returned to Iran to actually fulfill his destination. And also, he has been a great teacher of many institutions, and now he is the faculty member of the University of Religions and Denominations. And also, he is the head of the Department of Shia Studies in the same university. He's got his PhD from the University of Tehran in theology. Dr. Fayyazi, thank you very much. We are all ears.
Thank you, Dr. Rafati, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be in this dialogue, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you. And I should say, especially Dr. Watts from Hartford International University, where I did an MA in Islamic Studies and Christian-Muslim Relations. I did not have the pleasure to meet Dr. Watts when I was at Hartson, but his presence in this dialogue reminded me of many good memories. All right, I'm going to talk about the value of dialogue from a Shia Islamic perspective. Before I start, I need to clarify some points. First, as you know, different people mean different things when they talk about dialogue. Some say dialogue, and what they mean is a debate or a form of proselytization. On the other spectrum, some others say dialogue and mean working towards unification of religions. But what I mean by dialogue here is a conversation between two or more people in order to promote mutual understanding, to avoid unnecessary conflicts, and to pave the ground for cooperation to our common goals. And what I mean by a Shia perspective is the instructions and teachings that Shia Muslims can find in the sources of their religious tradition, which encourage them to, or pave the ground for them to engage in dialogue. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Shia Islam, I should say that the sources of Shia Islamic tradition consists of the Quran, the sayings and practice of the Prophet, and of the 12 infallible Imams. Now, what teachings and instructions can we find in these sources with regard to dialogue? First is the principle of respect. The Quran teaches us that we must avoid insulting anything that is considered sacred by the followers of other religions, even if it is an idol or a false god of polytheists. In chapter 6, verse 108, we read, "Do not revile those whom they call upon apart from God, lest they should revile God out of enmity without any knowledge." The message is clear. If you insult their gods, they will insult your God. This is not constructive. It just creates more and more enmity and conflict. Pay attention that promoting monotheism and eradicating polytheism and idolatry was one of the main, if not the main, elements of the Prophet's mission. Nevertheless, we see that the Quran instructs the Muslims to avoid disrespecting what their main opponents held to be sacred. Now, if Muslims are to avoid insulting their main religious opponents, it's clear how they have to behave toward the followers of other religious traditions, which are closer to their tradition. We see the observation of this principle in the practice of our imams. For instance, it is reported that an atheist called Ibn Abil Awja came to Mecca during the time of Hajj and visited Imam as-Sadiq, our sixth Imam, and wanted to debate with him. When the Imam told him, "Why have you come here?" He said insultingly, "I have come here to see the insanity of people." He meant the ritual of Hajj and how people, the things that people do there. And note that he is talking in this offensive way in one of the most sacred places and times for Muslims. If such a thing had happened today, this atheist would have faced severe consequences. But it is interesting that in response, the Imam merely said, "You are still in your error and disdain," and then added, "If the reality is as you say and it is not as you say, both we and you are saved. But if the reality is as we say and it is not, and it is as we say, we are saved and you are doomed." And that's it. No other reaction. In the lives of other Imams also, we see that sometimes non-Shi'i Muslims come to them and unknowingly insult them with their words. But the Imams do not insult back. Rather, they begin talking with these people in a calm and kind manner, which makes the insulters deeply regret their behavior. Another point is that in every dialogue, we should try to find commonalities and emphasize them. If we cannot find common grounds, we will have less chance for reducing conflicts and fewer opportunities for cooperation toward common goals. In this regard, we see that the Quran teaches us in chapter 3, verse 64, to call the people of the book, that is, Christians and Jews, to the common Lord, which is worshiping the one God. In chapter 29, verse 46, the Quran teaches us to emphasize our common ground in our conversation with the people of the book. The Quran says, and say, "We believe in what has been sent down to us and what has been sent down to you. Our God and your God is one, and to him we have surrendered." Another point that can affect dialogue with the followers of other religions is our attitude toward the religious other. If we see anyone who does not adhere to our religion as an enemy of God and doomed to hell in the hereafter, there won't be much room for dialogue. However, referring to the Quran, the Shi'i Muslim learns that his or her God is a merciful God toward all. He repeatedly calls himself the Beneficent, the Merciful. In several places, he introduces himself as the most merciful of the merciful. He states in chapter 22, verse 65, truly God is kind and merciful unto mankind. And note that it's mankind, not merely Muslims or believers. More than that, some Shi'i scholars, such as Allama Tabatabai, the great contemporary Shi'i philosopher, theologian, and commentator of the Quran, maintain that one's state before God and salvation in the hereafter depend on the extent to which one has been a seeker and follower of truth. Those who will be saved in the hereafter are the ones who followed the truth and submitted to it in this world, and those who refuse to do so are the ones who will be doomed. Note, this does not necessarily mean that all religions show us the truth and that we can adhere to any religion we like, but it means that if we come to the conclusion that our religion shows the truth and that it is the religion to which God wants human beings to adhere, still, we should not think that we necessarily have a better state before God and a better situation in the hereafter than the followers of other religions. Because maybe for some reasons other people in their search for the truth reach different conclusions, but they try to abide by the truth that they found more and better than us. Maybe verses 123 and 124 of chapter 4 can be adduced to support Allama Tabatabai's view. In these two verses, God addresses the Muslims, saying, "It will not be in accordance with your desires or the desires of the people of the book. Whosoever does evil shall be requited for it, and he will find no protector or helper for himself apart from God. And whosoever performs righteous deeds, whether male or female, and is a believer, such shall enter the garden, and they shall not be wronged so much as the speck on a date stone." Or verse 13 of chapter 49, which states, "O mankind, truly we created you from a male and a female," and then declares at the end, "Surely the most noble of you before God are the most reverent of you." This issue is, of course, a controversial topic in theology, but it's obvious to what extent adopting this perspective can facilitate interreligious dialogue and cooperation. And with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fayazi. That was very beneficial and helpful. I believe that what you said about having respect as a key factor, we believe that respect is the key factor before dialogue, while we have dialogue, and after dialogue. Even if we actually do not come to a conclusion in a dialogue, then we should respect each other even after dialogue. And it goes back to personality and to morality and the training of the society also. Thank you, Dr. Fayazi. And now, actually, it's turn of Bishop Watts. And it's our honor to have Bishop Watts. We know that he was in Hartford Seminary in 1995. He graduated from Hartford International University, and in 1986 he graduated from Yale University Divinity School, where he received his Master of Divinity degree there also. About now, Bishop Watts is the director of the Hartford Thurman Center for Justice and Transformational Ministry. He also had other positions, careers, jobs, and very, very, I think he should be very busy. And Bishop Watts, Dr. Watts, is the senior pastor of Sheila Baptist Church, if I'm saying it correctly, of New London City. He was elevated and consecrated to the sacred office of bishop by the International Bishops' Conference in 2008. He's a member of the churches covered and connected in a covenant. Bishop Watts, it's our honor to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. It's my honor to be here, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to talk from a Christian perspective on interfaith dialogue. It's so good to see Dr. Fazzi. I look forward to meeting you in person. I've heard nothing but kudos and accolades about your time here in Hartford, and so I look forward to that. I'm certain we will have that opportunity to share and dialogue. When asked to talk about a Christian perspective of interfaith dialogue, I'm forced to admit up front that I can talk from my perspective and a perspective of Christian interfaith dialogue, because there are many ways of practicing Christianity just as they are in Islam. And there are several conflicting views about whether or not we should even engage in dialogue. The reality is there are some people who are extremely critical of interfaith dialogue. They think that it cedes too much ground, reducing religion, reducing the faith to a lower denominator. And for them, they believe that it gives up what they perceive as absolute truth. They think that peace or even dialogue is being had that is avoiding what are the real conflicts or the things that separate us. Those persons who hold to such exclusivist positions find scripture to uphold that kind of thinking, and it holds them and holds the faith hostage to separatism and exclusivism. They want to pull scripture like I am the way, the truth, and the life, or to simply use scripture related to no one comes unto the Father but by me. But what they lack in understanding here is that even during the time of Jesus's pilgrimage on earth, he lauded and applauded exemplars of other faiths who carried out their daily living in such a way that it exceeded the way and living of others around them. He lauded the Good Samaritan as someone who was doing ministry and doing what was good and righteous and doing what was laudable. He picked on and lifted up persons of faith like the Roman centurion who would stand in his belief of him. I think that one of the issues related to interfaith dialogue and why we struggle with moving forward as much and as quickly as we can is that people get stuck in stereotypes. And what they have are things that may be marginally accurate or even accurate at some level for individuals, but it doesn't speak to the whole. And sometimes they get stuck in stereotypes that are wholly and completely falsehoods. But I think that in truth, many faith traditions share key, fundamental, foundational traditions that give credence to interfaith dialogue. The foundational principles like harmony and hospitality. Foundational principle like harmony we capture in the word peace, which is the same word used by my brothers and sisters in Salam and others in Shalom. Harmony is something that we hold dear to as that thing that all of us ought to seek. fourfold harmony, as one teaching has it, harmony with the divine, harmony with God, if you will, harmony with nature, harmony with oneself, and harmony with others. It is in that spirit, the seeking of harmony, as an essential factor, that we can really have interfaith dialogue, to really seek the peace of the city, and that is whatever city we find ourselves in. And that what makes Dr. Baer's comments so powerful, because she did not, the work that they're doing is in the city, not trying to fix another city. We can model here what we can do there, and then we can bring it with us and model it again for another group in a foreign country, so that they may be able to model this kind of peace building and working. I think that between the harmony and the practice, even shall I say, the pursuit of hospitality, one finds there an image from both of our traditions. As people of the book, we find an image of each of us realizing that we are created by God. And that means that, in the words of my dear newfound friend, we need to learn to treat others with respect. It is within both of our traditions that we respect one another, if only at the basis of our humanity. And the reality of that is that I cannot really respect the other, whoever that othering may be placed upon, without knowing as much as possible about the other and caring about that knowledge. I have to be there to know. And so a part of HIU, Harvard International University, where I work, is that we work diligently to get to know each other, to be in one another's presence, to pray together, to stand together, because at some point or another, it is in that basic knowledge. If you notice, I am thinking about everything that's been said, because Bishop Chan pointed to the fact that because of relationship, because of respect, someone in Iran can contact him in America and say, here is an urgent need. This is an exigency. But we have this relationship. Is there anything that you can do within your circle of contact that might work beyond governments, beyond whatever political walls have been structured, whatever situations are there to work to ameliorate this intolerable situation? It comes with respect. It comes with building relationships. And if that's so, I think that what we must recognize is that the global, national, local issues that must be addressed has to be addressed by the development of cooperative relationships among people of differing religious traditions, but people of the book who hold the foundational truth that we believe in God. And I think that one can definitely say that we all recognize that we have common concerns, that we have things that we ought to be concerned about. Many Christians now are coming to realize that it is a practical necessity, because we are in an interdependent world. Whether we want to realize it or not, the internet, all of the ways in which our societies are influencing one another, the ways in which we are dependent on one another, forces us to know that working together is better than working alone. I think that recognizing the harmony, recognizing the humanity begins as a foundation, but as a foundation must be built upon with respect and developing relationships. Howard Thurman, I work and direct the Howard Thurman Center, and Howard Thurman has a book called The Luminous Darkness. Here's a quote from that book that speaks to me as a way of grounding what I'm saying. Thurman says, a strange necessity has been laid upon me to devote my life to the central concern that transcends the walls that divide and would achieve in literal fact what is experienced as literal truth. Human life is one, and all are members of one another. This insight is the hard core of religious experience. To achieve in literal fact what is already being experienced in literal truth, human life is one. And recognizing that oneness allows us to work across any divide to make things better in the world. And I realize we are crunched for time. With that, I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Bishop Watts. I think you mentioned a very actually exact concept, a very unique concept, the concept of harmony. Harmony is different than similarity. You know, in the concept of harmony, you recognize the differences. You don't want them to be similar, but still you have harmony. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ahmed, if I can give you one quick illustration, I like to use the salad bowl, where you have many different types of vegetables there, lettuce and tomatoes and carrots, all of which have different colors, but they all make up one salad. And it is in harmony that their flavors come together. You can use whatever dressing you like.
This actually, I remember while you were presenting, I was recalling the verse of the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. We made you different tribes so that you can work with each other. Thank you very much. Actually, the last points of Professor Abdulrahim Gabahi has left. We are out of time, but actually, Professor Gabahi, we want to hear your last points. Then we will have the closing remarks and then very few questions.
Thank you, Dr. Rafati. In fact, I don't know from which point you lost the words of mine, but let me first of all thank both you and colleagues, especially the two honorable bishops. I really learned a lot from them. Of course, I learned from all the speakers, but this was really a good occasion. Of course, also I lost part of the presentation of Dr. Chloe, but at least one important point I learned that it's now time that we move or change from words into actions. But apart from these minor difficulties in communication, which I always, I'm a little bit a traditionalist, I really much hope that the next time we can meet each other and spend, instead of a few minutes or hours, a few days together, because we have so much to discuss, so much things to plan, and so much actions, in the words of Dr. Breyer, so much actions that we can do. But the last 3 points that I had mentioned, the first was, I believe dialogue is not the ceiling, is not the final goal or aim, but just the minimum of it. Cooperation is the ceiling. From dialogue is a tool of mutual understanding. Then it comes respect, and then it comes trust, and then it comes to cooperation with each other. That was my 8th point, and my 9th point was that since we are promoting the cause of God, and it's only one God, we are all creatures of one God, as Honorable Bishop Watts said. if we are promoting the cause of God, which we are, through this dialogue, through these sort of seminar sessions, then our holy book says, "En tansurullahi yansurkum." Since we are promoting the cause of God, the cause of believers, monotheism all over the world, God will help us, and not only God will help us in tansurullahi yansurkum, but also yusabbit aqdamakum. God will fortify our steps, the foundations of what we are doing. And the last point was that I really thanked everybody, especially you, Dr. Rafati, which have, moderated and prepared and managed this event. And I hope in the future, maybe one day you can come to our center if we will have the continuation of this dialogue in Tehran. Then we will have the facility in my center. But let us hope that in future we will also work with each other, and we will, inshallah, with the will of God, we will proceed in this direction, which is helpful to all of us. Thank you very much, and let me wish God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gavahi. Actually, we are planning to have LUKE10, at least some members of them in Iran in the near future. And it's actually my pleasure to be in your office. I was there. It was a very lovely office. And we try our best to bring the group to your office also in the near future. Two written questions, and maybe we can have for one or two person to ask their question by actually turning on their microphone. But before that, one question, actually it was asked, I will not address one presenter, but if some of you actually prefer to answer, that would be very great. Otherwise, I think this was asked in the presentation of Bishop Chain, that considering the expansion of the intercultural communications and the growth and the emergence of cultural differences and diversity, do you see that we should promote dialogue within the intellectuals and elites of the society, or a public dialogue? This is my conclusion of the question. What's your suggestion and solutions?
It's a great question. I have to go back and just answer it briefly by saying I'm not sure where many of the elites are in terms of their own theological journey. That's number one. Number two, I can also say that I've always looked at the word for politics as polis, a Greek word meaning the governance of the city. The governance of the city needs to have moral imperatives, which are very much a part of the governance of that city, whether it's the elites, whether it is political leaders, or whether it's just simply the people that make the city function. In my country, I believe that in my faith tradition, broad Christian traditions, we too often are very illiterate of what the core teachings of our scripture happens to be, our gospels, and also the way in which we translate them. And so therefore, it's difficult to really reach out to, say, elites and others within the system, within the city, who either are not believers or who, in fact, have a very different interpretation of scripture, I think, as Bishop Watts had presented. But it's something that we have continued to do, especially my work in Washington. I had access to the White House, to the State Department. I had access to the Pentagon. It was to be very clear with those leaders. And it was not easy to say, we must begin this engagement now. As Bishop Watts and others have said, we are living in a very, very interdependent world. And we cannot continue to govern unless we are aware and engaged in this work. and that we work together to understand core theological principles within all of our religious traditions, but especially between Islam and Christianity.
Thank you very much. If Dr. Gavahi is also present, I would address the second question to Dr. Gavahi. Dr. Gavahi, are you here? Okay, let me ask Bishop Watts, because this question was asked while Bishop Watts was ending his presentation and while Dr. Gavahi was adding his last points. So maybe it refers back to Bishop Watts. Bishop Watts, this question was written in Persian, but the core idea of the question is that what do you believe about the capacities of mysticism and totally spirituality? Generally spirituality. Can spirituality have a key role in dialogue and in closing people to each other?
Well, thank you for asking the question. It's our belief that we, at the Howard Thurman Center, we work from the level of being spiritual as a part of what we do, because we are people who have recognized the foundation of our experience with God, that we know that we now must be engaged with helping others to live a better life. So it is from that foundation of our understanding of our faiths that forces us, compels us would be probably a better word, to want to seek the good of the other.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear professors, Bishop Chain, Bishop Watts, Dr. Chloe, Professor Gavahi, and Dr. Fayyazi and Dr. Barzigar. It was my honor to have you here in this morning, in this evening, and we hope that this webinar is the first, not the last. Thank you very much, and all the participants of this webinar, thank you very much, and have a good day, and goodbye.